The autumn chill had just begun to settle over Millfield, Ohio when Olivia Bennett disappeared on a foggy October night in 2012. Population just under 5,000. The streetlights along Route 33 cast hazy yellow halos through the mist as she left the hospital after her nursing shift. Her red Honda Civic glided quietly along the wet asphalt, taillights gradually fading into the darkness near Blackwater Bridge. A security guard later recalled seeing those red lights vanish into the thick fog hanging over the Hocking River. From that moment, Millfield would never be the same. What transpired in the next 90 minutes would cast a shadow over this small town for 12 long years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. In the fall of 2012, Millfield, Ohio was a picture-perfect midwestern town. The maple trees along Main Street blazed with fiery colors, and the air carried the sweet scent of apple orchards and wood smoke. Against this idyllic backdrop, 25-year-old Olivia Bennett pursued her dream of becoming a pediatric nurse practitioner. With copper-colored hair that caught the light and kind eyes that put her young patients at ease, Olivia was described by everyone who knew her as compassionate, dedicated, and unfailingly optimistic. On the evening of October 12, Olivia finished her shift at Millfield Memorial Hospital at 11:30 p.m. The overnight nurses remembered her cheerful goodbye as she pulled her navy cardigan tighter around her shoulders, protecting against the autumn chill. Her final words echoed down the corridor, "See you all tomorrow, don't forget we're celebrating Jamie's birthday." The hospital security footage captured her walking to the staff parking lot, keys jingling in hand, her breath visible in the cold night air. Her phone showed a text to her father, "Robert, on my way home, Dad. Left you some lasagna in the fridge." The message was delivered but never read. Olivia climbed into her reliable red Honda Civic, a graduation gift from her parents, and drove out into the misty night. The fog had thickened considerably, settling like a white blanket over the roads of Millfield. At 11:45 p.m., a night fisherman on the banks of the Hocking River reported seeing headlights approach Blackwater Bridge, an old steel structure connecting the hospital side of town to the residential area where Olivia lived with her father. The fisherman recalled the lights slowing on the bridge, then suddenly accelerating before disappearing into the wall of fog. The sound of the car's engine faded, leaving only the gentle lapping of the river against the rocky shore. That was the last confirmed sighting of Olivia Bennett. When morning came, Millfield appeared serene under a bright autumn sun that had burned away the night's fog. But in the modest Bennett home on Maple Street, panic was taking hold. Robert Bennett, a widower who had raised Olivia alone after his wife's death from cancer when Olivia was just 12, had fallen asleep waiting for his daughter's return. When he woke at 6:30 a.m. to find her bed untouched and her car absent from the driveway, a cold fear gripped him. Robert called the hospital first, thinking perhaps Olivia had been asked to work a double shift, something that had happened occasionally during flu season. The head nurse's confused voice confirmed his worst fears. "No, Robert. Olivia left at the end of her shift. She should have been home hours ago." With trembling hands, Robert called Olivia's best friend, Megan Rhodes, who lived a few blocks away. Megan hadn't heard from Olivia since they'd texted about weekend plans the previous afternoon. By 7:15 a.m., Robert Bennett was standing in the Millfield police station, his voice breaking as he reported his daughter missing. Officer Jason Mills took the report with a practiced calmness that bordered on indifference. "Sir, she's an adult. Maybe she decided to stay with a friend? Or take an impromptu trip. We see this all the time, they turn up in a day or two." Robert's fist came down on the counter. "You don't understand. Olivia would never do that. She texts me if she's going to be even 15 minutes late. She knows I worry. Something is wrong." Officer Mills sighed, sliding a form across the desk. "Fill this out. We'll put out an alert for her car, but there's not much else we can do until she's been missing for at least 24 hours. By noon, Robert had taken matters into his own hands. He called Olivia's friends, co-workers, and acquaintances. He drove every possible route between the hospital and their home, scanning ditches and parking lots for any sign of the red Honda. He printed flyers with Olivia's photo, her graduation picture, beaming in her nursing scrubs, and began posting them throughout town. The community response was immediate. Millfield was the kind of place where people knew their neighbors, where an unexplained absence was cause for concern rather than dismissal. By evening, dozens of volunteers had gathered at the town hall, organized into search parties by Megan Rhodes, who had taken charge with surprising authority. "We'll split into teams," Megan announced, standing on the steps of town hall, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Focus on the wooded areas near Route 33 and both sides of Blackwater Bridge. Olivia's out there somewhere, and we're going to find her." As dusk fell, flashlights bobbed through the woods and along the riverbanks like fireflies. Calls of Olivia, echoed through the trees, met only by the hooting of owls and the rustle of autumn leaves. The Millfield Police Department, now taking the disappearance more seriously, deployed their K-9 unit. The German Shepherd followed Olivia's scent from the hospital parking lot to Blackwater Bridge, where the trail abruptly ended. Police Chief Rebecca Morgan addressed the growing crowd of concerned citizens. "The dog lost the scent midway across the bridge. We're expanding our search to include the river downstream. We've requested assistance from the county dive team, but they won't arrive until morning." Robert Bennett stood silently at the edge of the crowd, his face drawn and pale in the harsh glow of the police cruiser's headlights. His neighbor, elderly Mrs. Winters, placed a gentle hand on his arm. "We'll find her, Robert. This town takes care of its own." But as the night wore on and temperatures dropped, hope began to wane. The search parties returned, exhausted and empty-handed. The police had found no skid marks on the bridge, no debris that would indicate an accident. Olivia's cell phone had last pinged near the bridge before going offline completely. It was as if she had simply vanished into the fog. By the third day, Olivia's disappearance had made the regional news. Her face smiled from television screens across Ohio, the caption reading "25-year-old nurse missing from small town." The state police had joined the search, bringing additional resources and expertise. Helicopter sweeps scanned the river and surrounding forests. Divers probed the murky depths of the Hocking River beneath Blackwater Bridge. But with each passing day, the search yielded nothing. No car. No purse. No sign that Olivia Bennett had ever crossed that bridge on that foggy October night. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In the vacuum of evidence, rumors began to swirl through Millfield like the autumn leaves skittering down Main Street. Some whispered that Olivia had secretly been seeing someone, perhaps she'd run off with a lover. Others suggested financial troubles, drug problems, or mental health issues that had driven her to start a new life elsewhere. The cruelest rumors implied suicide, that the pressure of her nursing career and caring for her widowed father had become too much. These whispers infuriated Robert Bennett, who knew his daughter better than anyone. Olivia was happy, he insisted during an interview with the local newspaper. She loved her job, her friends, this town. She was saving for graduate school. She had plans for the future, a future she was excited about. Something happened to her that night. Something terrible. As days turned to weeks, the search efforts dwindled. The state police redirected their resources to other cases. The volunteers, though well-meaning, had jobs and families that demanded their attention. Even Megan Rhodes, who had been tireless in organizing search parties, had to return to her teaching position at the elementary school. Yet Robert Bennett refused to let his daughter be forgotten. Every morning, he replaced weather-damaged flyers with fresh ones. Every evening, he drove the route from the hospital to their home, watching the roadside with desperate hope. Each night, he left the porch light on, a beacon should Olivia find her way back. The case took an unexpected turn when Officer Jason Mills, the same officer who had initially dismissed Robert's concerns, came forward with information he had originally overlooked. A traffic camera at the intersection before Blackwater Bridge had captured Olivia's Honda passing through at 11:42 p.m. on the night she disappeared. More significantly, it showed a dark SUV following closely behind her, its headlights uncommonly bright in the fog. "We don't know if this vehicle is connected to Miss Bennett's disappearance," Chief Morgan cautioned at a press conference. "But we're asking the owner of this vehicle to come forward and help us with our investigation." No one came forward. The SUV had no visible license plate in the grainy footage, and its make and model were difficult to determine in the fog. It became another piece of a puzzle with too many missing parts. As months passed, Olivia's case file grew thinner, moved from the active investigations desk to a filing cabinet of cold cases. The local news stopped mentioning her name. The flyers on community boards were covered by announcements for holiday bazaars and winter festivals. Life in Millfield continued, though a subtle unease lingered like the fog that sometimes settled over Blackwater Bridge. For 1 year after Olivia's disappearance, a candlelight vigil was held in the hospital parking lot. Nurses, doctors, patients, and community members gathered to share stories about the young woman with the copper hair and kind smile. Robert Bennett stood among them, a candle trembling in his hand, as Megan Rhodes read a poem Olivia had written in nursing school about healing and hope. By the second anniversary, the vigil had dwindled to just Robert, Megan, and a handful of hospital staff. By the fifth, Robert stood alone on Blackwater Bridge, a single candle burning against the October wind, its flame reflecting in the dark water below. As the years passed, Robert Bennett aged visibly under the weight of uncertainty. His hair turned from salt and pepper to silver. Deep lines etched themselves around his eyes and mouth. He retired from his job as a high school physics teacher but remained in the house on Maple Street, unable to leave the last place his daughter had called home. Millfield itself changed subtly in the wake of Olivia's disappearance. Parents no longer allowed their children to walk home alone. Young women traveled in groups after dark. Blackwater Bridge gained a reputation as a place to avoid at night, with local teenagers telling stories about the ghost of a nurse who appeared in the fog, searching for her way home. 10 years after Olivia vanished, Robert Bennett suffered a minor heart attack. While recovering in the very hospital where his daughter had worked, he was visited by the new police chief, Thomas Wright, who had replaced the retired Rebecca Morgan. "I want you to know, Mr. Bennett," Chief Wright said, sitting beside the hospital bed, "that your daughter's case has never been officially closed. We still receive tips occasionally, and we follow up on every one. We haven't forgotten Olivia." Robert nodded weakly, the heart monitor beeping steadily beside him. "Neither have I, Chief. Not for a single day." What neither Robert Bennett nor Chief Wright could know was that the truth about Olivia's fate was about to surface, quite literally, bringing with it a revelation that would shatter Millfield's perception of itself and expose a betrayal beyond imagination. When 12 years had passed since that foggy October night, Millfield had learned to live with its ghost. Olivia Bennett became a cautionary tale, a tragic footnote in the town's history, a name spoken in hushed tones. The mystery of her disappearance had faded from active conversation, replaced by newer dramas and concerns. But beneath the surface of the Hocking River, beneath the weathered beams of Blackwater Bridge, the truth remained, waiting patiently for the day it would finally come to light. In the spring of 2024, the town of Millfield experienced historic rainfall. Storm systems stalled over southeastern Ohio for weeks, transforming the usually gentle Hocking River into a raging torrent. The waters rose steadily, threatening homes along the riverbank and putting immense pressure on the aging infrastructure of Blackwater Bridge. On a Wednesday morning in late April, County Engineer Marcus Tate stood on the riverbank, rain pelting his yellow safety vest as he surveyed the swollen waters with growing concern. The Hocking had risen nearly 15 feet above normal levels, its muddy current carrying debris, tree branches, parts of docks, even a small shed, downstream at alarming speeds. "We need to close Blackwater Bridge," he announced to his assistant, who was frantically taking notes on a rain-soaked clipboard. "The structural integrity is compromised. We've already seen visible shifting in the south support column." By noon, barriers blocked both ends of the historic bridge, and yellow caution tape fluttered in the wind. Local news crews arrived to document the flooding, their reporters shouting questions over the roar of the water. "This bridge has stood for nearly a century," Marcus explained into a reporter's microphone, rain dripping from his hard hat. "But it wasn't designed to withstand this kind of sustained pressure. We're bringing in a state inspection team and underwater assessment specialists as soon as the water recedes. 2 days later, when the rain finally stopped and the Hocking began its slow retreat, Marcus received a call from the Ohio Department of Transportation. They were dispatching their elite bridge assessment and recovery team, known locally as the River Rats, to evaluate Blackwater Bridge's underwater supports. The River Rats arrived in Millfield the following Monday, their specialized equipment truck pulling into the municipal parking lot just as the morning fog lifted. The team consisted of 4 members: Valerie Cortez, a structural engineer with 20 years of experience, twins Brandon and Brian Walsh, expert divers who specialized in underwater construction, and their team leader, Samuel Wright, a former Navy diver with a reputation for finding structural flaws others missed. "This doesn't look too bad," Samuel commented as the team assembled at the south end of Blackwater Bridge, his experienced eyes scanning the receding waters. "I've seen worse damage after milder floods." Valerie nodded, checking readings on her tablet. "The visible structure seems intact, but we need to check the underwater supports." The sonar indicated some anomalies around the central pier. The team set up their base station, a collapsible shelter filled with monitoring equipment, on the riverbank. Local residents gathered at a safe distance, watching with curiosity and concern. Blackwater Bridge was Millfield's main connection between the hospital district and the residential areas. Its closure had already caused significant disruption to daily life. Among the onlookers stood Robert Bennett, now in his early 70s, leaning heavily on a cane. His silver hair whipped in the breeze as he watched the dive team prepare their equipment. Megan Rhodes stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. "They're just checking the bridge supports," she assured him, noting the intensity with which he watched the proceedings. "It's routine after flooding like this." Robert nodded silently, his eyes never leaving the divers as they checked their oxygen tanks and communication equipment. Brandon and Brian Walsh entered the murky waters at 10:45 a.m., their black wetsuits disappearing beneath the surface as they followed the guidelines down to the central support column. Samuel monitored their progress from the bank, listening to their observations through a waterproof communication system. "Visibility's about 2 feet, Brandon's voice crackled through the speaker. "River's still running fast, but manageable. Support column appears intact," Brian added. "Moving to check the foundation now." Valerie studied the sonar display, which showed a 3-dimensional image of the riverbed beneath the bridge. "There's something unusual on the east side of the central support," she noted. "About 30 feet downstream. Can you check it out?" The divers acknowledged and adjusted their course, swimming against the current toward the anomaly. For several minutes, only their breathing could be heard over the communication system. Then suddenly, Brian's voice burst through, tense and urgent. "Sam, we've got something here. It's not bridge-related. Looks like a vehicle, mostly buried in sediment." A murmur passed through the onlookers. Finding abandoned vehicles in rivers wasn't uncommon. People had been illegally dumping cars in the Hocking for decades to avoid disposal fees or to commit insurance fraud. "What type of vehicle?" Samuel asked, his voice professional and measured. There was a pause before Brandon responded. "It's small. A sedan. Red, from what we can tell under the silt. Newer model." Robert Bennett stiffened, his knuckles whitening around the handle of his cane. "Can you see a license plate?" Samuel pressed, glancing toward the crowd with a growing sense of unease. Another pause. The gathered townspeople had fallen completely silent, sensing that something significant was unfolding. "Ohio plate," Brian confirmed. "Too much sediment to read the numbers. We're going to clear it." For 20 minutes, the crowd waited in tense silence as the divers worked beneath the surface. Police Chief Wright had arrived, standing with arms crossed beside the monitoring station. Valerie adjusted the sonar image, focusing on the submerged vehicle. "Its position nose down," she observed quietly to Samuel. "Like it went in from the bridge." Finally, Brandon's voice returned, subdued and solemn. "License plate is clear. Ohio tag GHT 4371. Chief Wright immediately pulled out his phone, stepping away from the crowd to call on the number. He returned moments later, his face grave as he approached Samuel. "That's Olivia Bennett's Honda Civic," he said, his voice low but still audible to those standing nearby. "The one that disappeared 12 years ago." A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Robert Bennett swayed on his feet, Megan Rhodes quickly steadying him. "There's more," Brian's voice came through the speaker, hushed despite the underwater microphone. "We can see inside. There's someone still in there." The scene transformed instantly. Chief Wright ordered the area cleared and established a perimeter. Emergency vehicles arrived with lights flashing but sirens silent, a grim acknowledgement that this was no longer a rescue operation. The county coroner was called, along with a specialized team to recover the submerged vehicle. Robert Bennett refused to leave despite the police's insistence. "That's my daughter," he said, his voice breaking but determined. "I've waited 12 years. I'm not leaving now." Chief Wright relented, allowing Robert and Megan to remain behind the police line, where they sat on the tailgate of an emergency vehicle, watching as additional divers and recovery equipment arrived. The recovery operation lasted well into the evening. Floodlights illuminated the river as specialized winches and airbags were positioned around the submerged Honda. A hushed crowd had reformed at the perimeter, standing vigil as the car was slowly, carefully raised from its watery grave. When the Honda finally broke the surface at 8:23 p.m., a collective hush fell over everyone present. Water cascaded from the rusted frame, revealing a vehicle that had clearly been submerged for many years. The once bright red paint had dulled to a muddy maroon, and river plants clung to the wheel wells and undercarriage. The recovery team secured the car and carefully towed it to shore, where it was immediately surrounded by a privacy screen. The county coroner, Dr. James Patel, approached the vehicle with his team, their movements deliberate and respectful. Robert Bennett watched from a distance, tears streaming down his weathered face. Megan held his hand tightly as Chief Wright approached them. "Mr. Bennett," the chief said gently, "we've confirmed that this is Olivia's vehicle. And there are remains inside. We'll need to perform formal identification, but given the circumstances." Robert nodded, unable to speak. After 12 years of uncertainty, the confirmation of his worst fears was both devastating and, in some terrible way, a relief. The not knowing had ended. The news spread through Millfield like wildfire. By midnight, a makeshift memorial had formed at the entrance to Blackwater Bridge, flowers, candles, and photographs of a smiling young woman with copper hair. The local radio station interrupted its regular programming to announce the discovery, and social media filled with shocked reactions and memories of the nurse who had disappeared on a foggy night 12 years earlier. The following morning, as forensic teams continued their careful examination of the vehicle and its contents, Chief Wright held a press conference on the steps of the police station. At approximately 11 a.m. yesterday, a vehicle was discovered in the Hocking River near the central support of Blackwater Bridge, he announced to the assembled reporters. "We have confirmed this vehicle belongs to Olivia Bennett, who was reported missing on October 13, 2012. Human remains were recovered from inside the vehicle, and while formal identification is pending, we have strong reason to believe they are those of Miss Bennett." He paused, his expression solemn. What was initially a missing persons case is now being investigated as a potential homicide. We are reopening the case file and will be reviewing all evidence with fresh eyes. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. Olivia Bennett had not run away, had not started a new life somewhere else, she had been there all along, beneath the waters of the Hocking River, beneath the bridge that thousands of Millfield residents had crossed daily for 12 years. At the county morgue, Dr. Patel conducted a thorough examination of the remains. Despite the years underwater, certain findings were clear and concerning. He requested a meeting with Chief Wright in his office rather than sending his initial report through official channels. "Thomas," Dr. Patel said gravely once the door was closed, "this was no accident. The victim suffered a severe fracture to the back of the skull that couldn't have resulted from the car's impact with the water." Chief Wright leaned forward, his expression darkening. "You're saying she was already injured before the car went into the river?" I'm saying she was attacked, Dr. Patel clarified. The injury is consistent with a forceful blow from a heavy, blunt object. Additionally, there are defense wounds on the hands and forearms. Olivia Bennett fought her attacker before she died. The chief sat back heavily in his chair. We need to re-examine everything. The original investigation assumed she'd had an accident in the fog, or possibly, that she'd taken her own life. This changes everything. Over the next several days, the state's top forensic team meticulously examined the recovered Honda Civic. Despite 12 years underwater, the vehicle yielded crucial evidence. The driver's side window had been smashed inward, not outward as would be expected if someone were trying to escape a sinking car. Olivia's purse was still in the vehicle, her wallet intact with credit cards and $43 in cash, ruling out robbery as a motive. Most significantly, the forensic team discovered impact damage to the rear bumper that contained traces of black paint from another vehicle. Analysis revealed it matched the paint used on certain models of SUVs manufactured between 2008 and 2012, potentially connecting to the dark SUV seen following Olivia in the traffic camera footage from that night. Chief Wright assembled a special task force dedicated to the case, including detectives from the State Bureau of Investigation. They began by re-interviewing everyone connected to the original case, starting with those who had seen Olivia on her final day. The hospital staff confirmed that Olivia's shift had ended normally. She hadn't seemed worried or distressed. Security footage showed her walking to her car alone, looking tired but otherwise fine. The night fisherman who had seen headlights on the bridge stood by his original statement, adding that he'd heard what he thought might have been a car horn just before the lights disappeared. But the most revealing interview came from an unexpected source. Darren Collins, a former bartender at the Rusty Nail, a now-closed establishment near the hospital, came forward after seeing news of the discovery. I didn't think it mattered before, he explained to the detectives, fidgeting nervously with his hands. But when I heard they found her car, I remembered something from that night. Collins recounted how Olivia had stopped briefly at the Rusty Nail after her shift, not to drink, but to deliver medication to the owner's wife, who was one of her patients. She was there maybe 10 minutes, Collins recalled. But while she was inside, I saw someone messing with her car in the parking lot. A man. He was looking through the windows, then he walked around it a couple times before getting back in his own vehicle, a black SUV. Did you recognize this man? Chief Wright pressed. Collins hesitated, then nodded slowly. Everyone in town knew him. It was Councilman Reeves. Gregory Reeves. The name sent a jolt through the investigation team. Gregory Reeves had been a prominent figure in Millfield for decades, city councilman, chairman of the hospital board, and a generous donor to various community projects, including the police department's K-9 unit. He had even helped organize some of the initial search parties when Olivia disappeared. Most significantly, in 2012, Reeves had been married to Dr. Diana Reeves, the hospital's chief of medicine and Olivia's direct supervisor. The task force proceeded cautiously, aware of Reeves's standing in the community. They quietly gathered background information, discovering that shortly after Olivia's disappearance, the Reeveses had divorced. Diana had moved to Chicago, while Gregory remained in Millfield, eventually remarrying and continuing his political career. He was currently serving his third term as mayor. When Diana Reeves was contacted in Chicago, her response was unexpected and damning. Rather than expressing surprise, she sounded resigned. I've been waiting for this call for 12 years, she told the detective. I never had proof, but I always suspected Greg was involved. Olivia had filed a sexual harassment complaint against him the week before she disappeared. She'd rejected his advances multiple times, and he wasn't a man used to hearing the word no. This revelation led investigators to search the hospital's archived records, where they discovered the complaint Olivia had filed, along with evidence that it had been removed from active records shortly after her disappearance, suppressed by someone with administrative access. Armed with this information, plus the paint evidence in Collins's testimony, the task force obtained warrants to search Gregory Reeves's properties, including a storage unit he maintained outside of town. What they found in that climate-controlled unit, hidden beneath tarps and old furniture, was the final piece of the puzzle, a black 2010 GMC Yukon with damage to its front bumper. The vehicle had been reported sold in 2013, but Reeves had apparently kept it hidden away, unable to part with the evidence of his crime, yet unwilling to destroy it completely. Forensic testing confirmed that the paint from the SUV matched the traces found on Olivia's Honda. More damning still, despite Reeves's efforts to clean the vehicle, luminol testing revealed traces of blood in the front seat and on the steering wheel, blood that DNA testing would later confirm belonged to Olivia Bennett. On a rainy morning in May 2024, almost exactly 12 years after Olivia Bennett had vanished, Police Chief Thomas Wright and 4 officers arrived at Millfield City Hall. They walked past the startled receptionist, down the hallway to the mayor's office, and opened the door without knocking. Gregory Reeves looked up from his desk, irritation quickly giving way to understanding as he saw the grim determination on their faces. He made no attempt to resist as Chief Wright read him his rights and placed him in handcuffs. "Gregory Reeves, you are under arrest for the murder of Olivia Bennett." The arrest of Millfield's mayor shocked the community to its core. Residents gathered in stunned clusters on street corners and in coffee shops, trying to reconcile the man they thought they knew, the charismatic leader, generous philanthropist, and community pillar, with the monster who had allegedly taken a young woman's life and hidden the truth for 12 years. For Robert Bennett, the arrest brought a complex mixture of emotions: grief renewed by the confirmation of his daughter's fate, relief at finally knowing the truth, and a burning anger toward the man who had not only taken Olivia from him but had stood beside him at vigils, offered condolences, and even established a nursing scholarship in Olivia's name. "He looked me in the eye," Robert told Megan Rhodes as they sat in his living room the evening after Reeves's arrest. "Year after year, he shook my hand and told me he was praying for answers. All while knowing exactly what happened to my girl." Megan squeezed his hand, her own eyes filled with tears. "No one could have known, Robert. He fooled everyone." "Not everyone," Robert said quietly, looking at the photograph of Olivia on the mantel. "Not my daughter. She saw through him, and it cost her her life." As the case against Gregory Reeves was built, the full truth of that foggy October night slowly emerged. Investigators pieced together a timeline based on physical evidence, witness statements, and eventually, Reeves's own confession when confronted with the overwhelming evidence against him. Olivia had rejected Reeves's advances multiple times and had finally reported him to hospital administration. Fearing for his reputation in marriage, Reeves had followed her from the hospital that night, forcing her car off Blackwater Bridge with his SUV. When Olivia survived the initial crash into the river and attempted to escape, Reeves had waded into the water and attacked her, ensuring she couldn't return to tell her story. For 12 years, the river had kept her secret. For 12 years, Reeves had lived with his, hiding behind a facade of respectability while the truth lay submerged beneath the dark waters of the Hocking River. Now, as Millfield prepared for one of the most high-profile trials in Ohio's recent history, a community struggled to heal from a betrayal that cut to its very core. The man they had trusted to lead them had harbored the darkest of secrets, a truth that had waited patiently beneath Blackwater Bridge for the floodwaters to finally bring it to light. The arrest of Mayor Gregory Reeves sent shockwaves through Millfield that reverberated far beyond the small town's borders. Within hours, news vans from Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland lined Main Street. Reporters conducted interviews on the courthouse steps, their microphones thrust toward shell-shocked residents struggling to process the betrayal. The Millfield Daily Chronicle ran a special edition with a stark headline, "Trusted Leader Accused of Murder." Beneath it was a split image: on one side, Reeves in his mayoral regalia cutting a ribbon at the new library, on the other, his mugshot, hollow-eyed and grim. The contrast could not have been more jarring. Inside the county jail, Reeves sat in an orange jumpsuit, a far cry from his tailored suits and campaign trail smile. His attorney, Malcolm Porter, a high-priced criminal defense lawyer from Columbus, advised him to remain silent, but after 2 days of isolation, Reeves requested a meeting with Chief Wright. "I want to tell you what happened," Reeves said, his voice flat, eyes fixed on the metal table separating them. "Not for me. It's too late for that. But for Robert Bennett. for the town. They deserved to know. What followed was a 3-hour recorded confession that laid bare the events of that foggy October night and the 12 years of deception that followed. As transcripts later revealed, Reeves recounted how his pursuit of Olivia had begun months before her disappearance. "I thought I was entitled," he admitted, shame evident in his slumped posture. "I was on the hospital board. I donated to the nursing program that gave her a scholarship. In my mind, she owed me gratitude, attention, more." Olivia had rebuffed his advances professionally at first, then more firmly as his behavior escalated. The week before her disappearance, she had filed a formal complaint with hospital administration. Diana Reeves, his wife and the chief of medicine, had confronted him about it. Diana threatened divorce, public humiliation. "My political career, my standing in the community, everything was at risk," Reeves explained. "I convinced myself that Olivia was the problem. If she hadn't reported me, none of this would be happening." On the night of October 12, Reeves had been drinking at the Rusty Nail when he spotted Olivia entering to deliver medication to the owner's wife. Something inside him snapped at the sight of her, the woman who threatened everything he had built. "I waited in my SUV," he continued, voice hollow. "When she left, I followed her. The fog was thick. No one could see us on Blackwater Bridge. I accelerated, rammed the back of her car. I just wanted to scare her at first, to send a message. The impact sent Olivia's Honda crashing through the bridge's aging guardrail." Reeves stopped and watched as the car hit the water. When he saw Olivia moving inside, attempting to escape as the car began to sink, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. "I could have helped her," he whispered, tears finally breaking through his stoic facade. "I should have. Instead, I waded in, made sure she couldn't tell anyone what I'd done. That's the moment I became a monster." Afterward, Reeves had driven home, soaking wet, and told his wife he'd fallen into a drainage ditch while checking on campaign signs in the fog. The next morning, when news of Olivia's disappearance spread, he joined search parties, offered rewards, consoled Robert Bennett, all while knowing exactly where Olivia was. "Every year got harder," he confessed. "Every anniversary, every vigil. Robert's face, aged with grief, haunted me. But the longer it went on, the more impossible it seemed to come forward. Too many lies, too many years." When the SUV was recovered from the storage unit, forensics found more than just paint and blood evidence. In the glove compartment, sealed in a plastic bag, was Olivia's nursing ID badge, a trophy the killer had kept all these years, unable to dispose of it yet unwilling to part with the evidence of his crime. Chief Wright released carefully edited portions of the confession to the public, sparing the Bennett family the most graphic details while ensuring the community understood the magnitude of Reeves's actions and the extent of his deception. The reaction was swift and polarizing. Most Millfield residents recoiled in horror and disgust, unable to reconcile the respected mayor with the cold-blooded killer he had confessed to being. "He sat on my porch drinking lemonade," one elderly resident told reporters, voice trembling with rage. "He asked about my grandchildren while knowing what he'd done to that poor girl." But a small, vocal minority refused to believe Reeves's guilt, despite his confession. They claimed he was being framed by political enemies, that the evidence was circumstantial, that the confession had been coerced. These denials reflected not just loyalty to Reeves but a deeper reluctance to accept that someone they had trusted so completely could have betrayed them so profoundly. Robert Bennett, now in his 70s and frail from years of grief, declined all interviews but issued a brief statement through his longtime friend, Megan Rhodes. "The arrest and confession bring closure but not peace," the statement read. "No punishment can restore what was taken from Olivia, from our family, and from this community. We ask for privacy as we finally lay our daughter to rest." With the case against Reeves solidifying, the county prosecutor announced that the state would seek life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Ohio had abolished the death penalty in 2023, sparing Reeves that fate, a fact that angered many in the community who felt he deserved the harshest possible punishment. As the legal proceedings moved forward, Millfield grappled with the aftermath of Reeves's betrayal. The city council, now led by Vice Mayor Patricia Sandoval, worked to establish a sense of normalcy amid the chaos. Emergency sessions were held to address the leadership vacuum and restore public confidence in local government. The actions of one man, however monstrous, do not define our community, Sandoval declared at her first press conference as acting mayor. Millfield is more than Gregory Reeves. We are the volunteers who searched for Olivia for years. We are the people who supported Robert Bennett through unimaginable grief. We are a community that values truth, even when that truth is painful. The hospital board, of which Reeves had been chairman until his arrest, commissioned an independent investigation into how Olivia's harassment complaint had been handled. The findings were damning, evidence of systematic suppression of complaints against powerful figures, a culture of silence that had protected Reeves and potentially others like him. Dr. James Howard, the new chief of medicine, held a town hall meeting to address these failures. We failed Olivia Bennett, he acknowledged, his voice breaking. Our systems were designed to protect the institution, not the people within it. That changes today. The hospital announced a complete overhaul of its reporting procedures, the establishment of an anonymous ethics hotline, and the creation of the Olivia Bennett Memorial Fund to support nurses who experienced workplace harassment. These changes, while unable to undo the past, represented a commitment to learning from it. In late June 2024, 2 months after the discovery of Olivia's car in the Hocking River, her remains were finally released to the Bennett family. The funeral, held at St. Joseph's Catholic Church, drew hundreds of mourners. The church, which seated only 200, could not contain the crowd, with many standing outside in respectful silence. The service was a celebration of Olivia's life rather than a focus on the tragedy of her death. Former colleagues shared stories of her compassion with patients, her humor during long shifts, her unwavering dedication to the nursing profession. Photographs from her childhood and young adulthood line the entrance to the church, Olivia at her high school graduation, on a family vacation to Lake Erie, in her nursing scrubs on her first day at Millfield Memorial. Robert Bennett, supported by Megan Rhodes, approached the pulpit with slow, measured steps. The church fell silent as he unfolded a piece of paper with visibly trembling hands. "My daughter, Olivia, embodied the best of humanity," he began, his voice surprisingly strong despite his fragile appearance. "She was kind when kindness was needed, firm when principles demanded it, and courageous always. The man who took her from us saw these qualities as threats to his power. He was wrong." Robert paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "For 12 years, I lived with uncertainty. Now I live with grief, but also with truth." Olivia stood against a powerful man who thought himself above reproach. In death, she has exposed his crimes and inspired changes that will protect others. My daughter's light could not be extinguished, not by water, not by time, not by the acts of a desperate man. As he returned to his seat, the congregation rose in a standing ovation, not for his words but for his enduring strength and dignity through unimaginable circumstances. Following the service, a procession of nearly 500 vehicles traveled from the church to Riverside Cemetery, where Olivia was laid to rest beneath a flowering dogwood tree. As mourners dispersed, many stopped to place white roses, Olivia's favorite flower, on the fresh grave, creating a blanket of white petals that seemed to glow in the summer sunlight. As July approached, national media attention began to wane, but the impact on Millfield remained profound. The town that had once prided itself on its close-knit nature and small-town values now questioned those very assumptions. If they had been so wrong about Gregory Reeves, a man they had elected 3 times to lead them, what else might they have missed? This collective soul-searching manifested in concrete actions. The City Council passed the Olivia Bennett Transparency Act, requiring all city officials to disclose potential conflicts of interest in establishing an ethics committee comprised of citizens rather than politicians. The police department instituted new protocols for missing persons cases, including mandatory review by outside agencies. At Millfield Memorial Hospital, a bronze plaque was installed in the nursing wing with Olivia's image and the words, "In memory of Olivia Bennett, whose courage reminds us that our first duty is to truth and to the vulnerable in our care." The trial of Gregory Reeves began in early August 2024, drawing renewed media attention to Millfield. The courthouse square was transformed into a makeshift press camp, with satellite trucks and reporters from across the country documenting what many called the ultimate small-town betrayal. Inside the courtroom, Reeves sat beside his attorney, diminished from the confident political figure he had once been. His wife of 7 years had filed for divorce immediately after his arrest, and former allies had distanced themselves, leaving him isolated in his disgrace. The prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. Forensic experts detailed how paint from Reeves's SUV matched traces found on Olivia's car. Medical examiners explained the trauma to Olivia's skull and the defensive wounds on her arms. The jury heard the most damning portions of Reeves's confession, his own voice admitting to the crime that had haunted Millfield for over a decade. Defense attorney Malcolm Porter, recognizing the futility of denying Reeves's guilt in the face of his confession and the physical evidence, instead focused on his client's mental state. Gregory Reeves was a man under extreme pressure, Porter argued. Fear of scandal, fear of losing his position, fear of public humiliation, these fears clouded his judgment and led to a tragic, impulsive act that he has regretted every day since. This strategy found little sympathy with the jury or the community. As one juror later told reporters, plenty of people face pressure without becoming murderers. He made choices, to harass Olivia, to follow her that night, to ensure she couldn't identify him. Those weren't impulsive acts. They were calculated. After 7 days of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. As the verdict was read, Reeves showed no visible reaction, his face a mask of resignation. In the gallery, Robert Bennett closed his eyes briefly, his expression one of grim satisfaction rather than joy. Justice had been served, but it could not restore what had been lost. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, Judge Martha Simmons addressed Reeves directly. "Mr. Reeves, you had every advantage in life, education, wealth, position, respect. You used these privileges not to serve your community, as your office demanded, but to prey upon it. When your advances were rightfully rejected, you responded with violence. When faced with the consequences of your actions, you chose deception for 12 long years." The judge leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "During those years, you stood beside Olivia Bennett's father at vigils. You established scholarships in her name. You presented yourself as a grieving community leader while knowing you were responsible for the very tragedy you pretended to mourn. This court can conceive of few betrayals more profound." She sentenced Reeves to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, the maximum penalty under Ohio law. As he was led from the courtroom, Reeves finally broke his stoic facade, turning toward Robert Bennett. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I know it means nothing, but I am sorry." Robert did not respond, his eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to give his daughter's killer the acknowledgement he sought. Outside the courthouse, as news of the sentence spread, a spontaneous gathering formed on the square. It was not a celebration, there was nothing to celebrate in this tragic conclusion, but rather a collective exhale, a community acknowledging that a painful chapter had finally closed. That evening, hundreds gathered on Blackwater Bridge for a candlelight vigil, not just for Olivia, but for the town itself. The aging structure, soon to be replaced by a modern concrete span, had become both a site of tragedy and a symbol of hidden truths finally brought to light. Patricia Sandoval, now officially elected as mayor, addressed the crowd. "We stand on this bridge tonight, looking both backward and forward," she said, her voice carrying over the gentle sound of the river below. "We acknowledge the pain of the past, the loss of Olivia Bennett, the betrayal by someone we trusted, the fractures these events created in our community. But we also look toward a future built on the lessons we've learned." She gestured toward the river, now placid in the summer evening. "The Hocking revealed its secret when the time was right. Now we must ensure that no more secrets fester beneath the surface of our community. Transparency, accountability, compassion, these must be our guiding principles as we move forward together." As the crowd dispersed, many tossing white rose petals into the water below, Robert Bennett remained, leaning against the railing with Megan Rhodes by his side. They watched the sunset paint the river in shades of gold and amber, a beauty that seemed at odds with the painful history the water had concealed. "What will you do now?" Megan asked gently, knowing that Robert's life had been defined by the search for his daughter for so long. Robert considered the question, watching the candles still flickering along the bridge. "I'll live," he said simply. "Olivia would want that. Not just existing, as I've done these past 12 years, but truly living. There's a difference." In the months that followed, Millfield gradually found a new equilibrium. The media attention faded, replaced by the rhythms of small-town life, harvest festivals, high school football games, holiday preparations. But the community had been fundamentally changed by the events of that spring and summer. The new bridge that replaced the aging Blackwater Bridge was named Bennett Crossing, a quiet acknowledgement of the family's long ordeal. The first vehicle to cross it belonged to Robert Bennett, a symbolic journey from the past into the future. At Millfield Memorial Hospital, the changes inspired by Olivia's case had far-reaching effects. Reports of workplace harassment increased initially, not because such behavior had become more common, but because victims now felt empowered to come forward. Each complaint was investigated thoroughly, regardless of the accused position or power. The Olivia Bennett Memorial Fund expanded beyond its original scope, providing scholarships to nursing students who demonstrated not just academic excellence but moral courage. The first recipient, a young man from a neighboring town, had reported unsafe practices at his previous workplace despite pressure to remain silent. Robert Bennett, finding purpose in advocacy, began speaking at regional hospitals and nursing schools about the importance of protecting whistleblowers and creating safe reporting systems. His quiet dignity and unwavering commitment to his daughter's legacy made him a powerful voice for institutional change. "Silence protects the powerful," he often said during these talks. "Truth protects the vulnerable. Choose truth, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult." In December 2024, as the first snow fell on Olivia's grave, Robert visited with a Christmas wreath. Megan accompanied him, as she had throughout the years of uncertainty and through the painful revelations that followed. Their friendship, forged in grief, had deepened into something neither could quite define but both treasured. As they stood beside the grave, Robert noticed a small stone angel someone had placed near the headstone. Beside it was a note in unfamiliar handwriting: "Because of you, I spoke up. Because of you, I was heard. Thank you." Robert carefully refolded the note and placed it in his pocket, a tangible reminder that his daughter's story continued to create ripples of change. Olivia had been silenced, but her legacy spoke volumes. "She would have been 37 this year," Robert said softly, adjusting the wreath against the headstone. "I wonder what she would have become." Megan slipped her hand into his. "Look around you, Robert. Look at the hospital policies that changed because of her. Look at the students inspired by her story. Look at the community transformed by facing the truth about her death. She became more than anyone could have imagined." In Millfield, Ohio, the wounds inflicted by Gregory Reeves would never fully heal. Trust, once broken so profoundly, could not be perfectly restored. But from those wounds had grown a stronger, more vigilant community, one that questioned authority rather than blindly accepting it, one that valued transparency over comfortable illusions, one that understood the courage required to stand against power. As Robert and Megan walked back toward Bennett Crossing, snow crunching beneath their feet, they passed a group of nursing students heading toward the hospital for their evening shift. The young men and women, bundled against the cold, moved with purpose and confidence, each wearing a small pin on their coats, a white rose, symbol of the Olivia Bennett Memorial Fund and a quiet reminder of the legacy that continued to guide them. The sun was setting over Millfield, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. But unlike the shadows that had darkened the town for 12 long years, these were clear and honest, acknowledged rather than denied, faced rather than feared. The truth about Olivia Bennett had been submerged beneath dark waters and deeper deceptions, but it had finally risen to the surface, bringing with it painful revelations and necessary changes. In a small Ohio town once defined by secrets, truth had become the foundation for healing, a difficult, imperfect, ongoing process of reconstruction built on the courage of a young woman who had refused to be silenced, even in death. The Hocking River flowed on beneath Bennett Crossing, its waters carrying the seasons forward. And Millfield moved with it, navigating the currents of memory and hope, honoring the past while building a more transparent future, one day, one truth, one act of courage at a time. 5 years after the trial of Gregory Reeves, Millfield had transformed in ways both visible and invisible. The physical changes were easy to spot. Bennett Crossing, with its modern concrete span and memorial plaque, had replaced the weathered wood of Blackwater Bridge. The hospital had expanded, adding a new wing dedicated to nursing education. Downtown storefronts, once struggling, now displayed fresh paint and busy interiors as the town experienced an unexpected renewal. But the deeper changes lay in the community's fabric itself, a newfound vigilance against abuse of power, an openness about difficult truths, and a commitment to protecting whistleblowers that had become central to the town's identity. On a crisp autumn morning in 2029, 17 years after Olivia Bennett's disappearance, Robert Bennett stood on the riverbank, watching golden leaves drift lazily on the current. At 77, his body had grown frilier, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. The river that had hidden his daughter's fate for so long now offered a strange comfort, a testament to how even the deepest secrets eventually surface. "Penny for your thoughts," came a familiar voice behind him. Robert turned to see Megan Rhodes approaching, her dark hair now threaded with silver. Their friendship, forged in grief and strengthened through years of advocacy work, had blossomed into love 3 years earlier. Their wedding, small and intimate, had been held beside Olivia's grave, a way of including her in a moment of joy neither had expected to find again. "Just remembering," Robert replied, taking Megan's hand. "It's different now. The memories don't cut as deeply." Megan nodded, understanding. "The ceremony starts in an hour. We should head over soon." They walked together toward their car, parked near the newly constructed Millfield Community Center. Today marked the dedication of the Olivia Bennett Center for Ethics in Healthcare, a joint venture between Millfield Memorial Hospital and Ohio State University's nursing program that would train healthcare professionals in ethical reporting and patient advocacy. As they drove through town, they passed familiar faces on the sidewalks, neighbors who waved with genuine warmth. Time had softened the community's divisions, though the scars remained. Those who had initially defended Reeves had largely come to accept his guilt as the evidence became irrefutable. Those who had accused others of complicity had mostly recognized that widespread guilt was neither accurate nor helpful in healing the town. The parking lot at the new center was already filling as they arrived. Television crews set up cameras, but these were local stations rather than national networks. Millfield's story was no longer breaking news, but it remained a powerful case study in small-town governance and institutional accountability. Inside the modern building, photographs of Olivia lined the entrance hall, not just the somber missing person images that had become so familiar during the search, but earlier pictures showing her laughing with friends, playing soccer in high school, holding her acceptance letter to nursing school with triumphant joy. This was Olivia as she had lived, not merely as she had been lost. The auditorium filled quickly with hospital staff, nursing students, community members, and visitors from neighboring towns. On stage, chairs awaited the ceremony's participants, including Robert and Megan, hospital administrators, university officials, and the keynote speaker, Diana Reeves, Gregory's ex-wife, who had returned to Millfield for the first time since their divorce 17 years earlier. At precisely 11 o'clock, the ceremony began. Dr. James Howard, still serving as chief of medicine, welcomed the attendees and outlined the center's mission, to ensure that healthcare professionals had the training, resources, and institutional support to report ethical concerns without fear of retaliation. "What happened to Olivia Bennett was not just a murder," Dr. Howard said, his voice solemn. "It was a systemic failure. When she reported harassment, our systems protected power rather than vulnerability. When she disappeared, those same systems allowed her killer to lead the investigation. Today, we dedicate ourselves not just to remembering Olivia, but to ensuring that such failures never happen again." Patricia Sandoval, now in her second term as mayor, spoke next about the broader changes in Millfield's governance, the Citizen Ethics Committee that reviewed all official actions, the anonymous reporting system for municipal employees, the mandatory recusal procedures for any official with a potential conflict of interest. These changes didn't bring Olivia back, Mayor Sandoval acknowledged. But they have created a community where truth is valued over comfort, where power is checked by transparency, and where courage is recognized as our highest virtue. When Robert rose to speak, a hush fell over the auditorium. Many present had watched him transform from a grief-stricken father searching desperately for his missing daughter to an eloquent advocate for institutional reform. His quiet dignity had earned him respect that transcended political divisions. 17 years ago today, my daughter drove across Blackwater Bridge and never came home, Robert began, his voice steady despite the emotion visible in his eyes. For 12 of those years, I lived with questions that seemed unanswerable. Who took Olivia from us? Why? How could someone disappear so completely in a town where everyone knew everyone? He paused, looking out over the audience. The answers, when they came, were harder than the questions. The man who killed my daughter was someone I had trusted, someone we all trusted. He sat beside me at vigils, offered condolences, established scholarships in Olivia's name, all while knowing exactly what had happened to her. That betrayal cut deeper than I can express. Robert adjusted his glasses, glancing at the notes he had prepared but seemed not to need. But something remarkable happened in the aftermath of that revelation. This community, faced with an unthinkable truth, chose not to look away. You chose to examine the systems that had failed Olivia, the culture of silence that had protected her killer, the assumptions about authority that had left us vulnerable. He gestured toward the audience, where many nodded in solemn agreement. The Olivia Bennett Center represents the best of that response, not just grief or outrage, but constructive action. My daughter was a healer. She chose nursing because she wanted to ease suffering. This center continues that mission by preventing the kinds of institutional failures that ultimately took her from us. As Robert returned to his seat, wiping tears from his eyes, Megan squeezed his hand in silent support. The next speaker approached the podium, Diana Reeves, elegant in a simple navy dress, her face composed but lined with the weight of her own complicated grief. I was chief of medicine when Olivia Bennett filed her report against my then-husband, Diana began, her voice slightly hoarse with emotion. I received that report, read her clear, professional documentation of Gregory's inappropriate behavior, and took what I thought were appropriate steps. I confronted him. I demanded he stop. I believed, or perhaps wanted to believe, that was enough. She gripped the edges of the podium, steadying herself. When Olivia disappeared days later, I never connected it to the report. That failure of imagination, or perhaps of courage, has haunted me for 17 years. I could have done more. I should have done more. I should have recognized the threat that my husband posed, not just to Olivia but to the integrity of our institution. Diana looked directly at Robert. No apology can suffice for such a failure. But I can share what I've learned in the years since, as I've worked to reform reporting systems in Chicago's medical community. The most dangerous phrase in any institution is, "That's just how it is." The most dangerous assumption is that power will check itself. The most dangerous silence is the one that feels safer than speaking up. As Diana concluded her remarks, the audience sat in reflective silence. Her presence represented another kind of courage, the willingness to face one's own complicity, to return to a community where her former husband's crimes had made her name synonymous with institutional failure, to speak honestly about mistakes that could never be undone. The ceremony continued with the official ribbon cutting, performed jointly by Robert Bennett and the Dean of Ohio State's nursing program. As the ribbon fell, the audience rose in a standing ovation that seemed to honor not just the new center but the long journey that had led to this moment. Following the ceremony, attendees moved to the reception area, where displays detailed the center's programs, ethics training for healthcare providers, support services for whistleblowers, research initiatives focused on institutional accountability, and the Olivia Bennett Fellowship for nursing students committed to patient advocacy. Robert found himself surrounded by well-wishers, including former hospital colleagues of Olivia's who shared memories of her compassion with patients and her quiet determination to improve care standards. These stories, painful in the early years after her disappearance, now brought a bittersweet comfort, reminders that his daughter's brief life had mattered, had touched others, had created ripples that continued to spread. As the crowd thinned, Diana Reeves approached Robert and Megan, her expression hesitant. "I've wanted to speak with you privately for years," she said softly. "But I understood why you might not want that." Robert studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "We can talk now, if you'd like." The three found a quiet corner of the reception area, away from the remaining guests. Diana removed a small envelope from her purse, handling it with reverence. "After the trial, when they were clearing out Gregory's belongings from our old house, they found this," she explained, extending the envelope to Robert. "It was in a box of keepsakes he'd left behind. I've debated for years whether to give it to you or destroy it. In the end, I thought the choice should be yours." Robert accepted the envelope with cautious hands. Inside was a small, creased photograph, Olivia in her nursing scrubs, smiling at something off-camera, unaware she was being photographed. On the back, Gregory had written a single line in precise handwriting, "The one who defied me." Robert stared at the image, then at the words, a muscle working in his jaw. After a long moment, he carefully tore the photograph in half, separating Olivia's image from the words written about her. "Her courage was never about him," Robert said quietly, pocketing the half with his daughter's face and letting the other fall into a nearby trash can. "It was about doing what was right, regardless of the consequences. That's what we're celebrating today." Diana nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Robert. Not just for what Gregory did, but for my own blindness. I should have seen what was happening." "Many of us should have seen things more clearly," Megan interjected gently. "The question is what we do with that knowledge now." Diana straightened her shoulders, composing herself. "That's why I came back. To face this place, these memories, these failures, and to see what Millfield has built from them. It's remarkable, truly." As they parted, Robert felt a weight lift that he hadn't realized he still carried. Diana's apology couldn't change the past, but it acknowledged a truth that had gone unspoken for too long, that Gregory Reeves's crime had been enabled by institutional cultures that prioritized power over protection, reputation over justice. Later that afternoon, as the autumn sun began its early descent, Robert and Megan visited Olivia's grave. The cemetery was peaceful, dappled with golden light filtering through maple trees. Olivia's headstone, simple but elegant, bore her name, dates, and the words she had chosen as her nursing school motto, "With courage and compassion." Robert placed a bouquet of white roses on the grave, then stood in contemplative silence. After a moment, he spoke, his voice soft but clear. "I think she would be proud of today. Not because the center bears her name, but because it represents everything she stood for, protecting the vulnerable, speaking truth to power, creating systems where doing the right thing isn't the hardest thing." Megan nodded, her arm linked through his. "She changed Millfield more profoundly in death than many people do in a lifetime of trying. That's a powerful legacy." As they walked back toward the car, Robert paused to watch a group of nursing students crossing Bennett Bridge, their white uniforms bright against the autumn foliage. Each wore the small white rose pin that had become the symbol of the Olivia Bennett program, a reminder of commitments made and values upheld. "You know what gives me peace now?" Robert said, watching the students disappear around a bend in the road. "Knowing that Olivia's story didn't end in that river. It continues in every nurse who speaks up when they see something wrong, in every policy that protects whistleblowers, in every institution that chooses transparency over self-protection." Megan squeezed his hand. "That's what justice really looks like, not just punishment for past wrongs, but transformation that prevents future ones." In the years that followed the center's opening, its impact extended far beyond Millfield. Healthcare facilities across Ohio and neighboring states sent staff for training in ethical reporting and institutional accountability. The case study of Olivia Bennett and Gregory Reeves became standard curriculum in medical ethics courses, a powerful illustration of how harassment, if unchecked, could escalate to violence, and how institutional silence could become complicity. Robert Bennett, despite his advancing age, continued to speak regularly at the center, sharing Olivia's story with each new class of healthcare professionals. His testimony never lost its power, the quiet heartbreak of a father who had lost his daughter not just to a killer's violence but to systems that had failed to protect her when she sought help. The case also continued to resonate in unexpected ways. In 2031, a true crime documentary titled Beneath the Bridge brought renewed national attention to Millfield's story. Unlike earlier sensationalized coverage, the documentary focused on the community's response to Reeves's betrayal, the institutional reforms, the commitment to transparency, the transformation of tragedy into meaningful change. When the filmmakers approached Robert for an interview, he initially declined, wary of reliving painful memories for entertainment. But after viewing early footage that centered Olivia's courage rather than just her victimhood, he agreed to participate, seeing an opportunity to extend her legacy beyond Millfield. The most important thing to understand about what happened here, Robert told the filmmakers, seated in the center that bore his daughter's name, is that it wasn't inevitable. If Olivia's report had been taken seriously, if institutional protections had been in place for whistleblowers, if the initial investigation hadn't been controlled by the very man responsible, the outcome could have been entirely different. The documentary, released on a major streaming platform, sparked conversations about small-town governance, institutional accountability, and the courage required to challenge powerful figures. Millfield, once notorious for harboring a killer in its highest office, became recognized as a model for community healing and systemic reform. Gregory Reeves, meanwhile, remained in prison, his appeals exhausted, his name synonymous with betrayal of public trust. In 2032, 20 years after Olivia's disappearance, he suffered a stroke that left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak, a man once defined by his charismatic public persona now rendered silent and dependent on others. When Robert learned of Reeves's condition through a routine notification from the prison system, he felt neither satisfaction nor pity, only a profound weariness. Justice isn't about what happens to him anymore, he told Megan that evening. It's about what we've built in Olivia's name. On the 20th anniversary of the discovery of Olivia's car, Millfield held a community-wide day of service rather than a somber memorial. Volunteers worked on projects throughout town, planting trees along the river, renovating the children's wing at the hospital, establishing a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in ethics and compliance. Robert and Megan, now in their 80s but still active in community affairs, planted a white rose bush in the hospital garden. As they worked, nursing students joined them, many of them too young to remember the original events but well-versed in their significance. "Tell us about Olivia," one student asked as they carefully positioned the plant. "Not just what happened to her, but who she was." Robert smiled, his weathered hands patting soil around the rose's roots. "She was stubborn in the best way, determined to do things properly even when shortcuts were tempting. She had a laugh that filled the room. She kept chocolate hidden in her nursing station to share with patients having a particularly hard day. She loved thunderstorms and would sit on our porch to watch them roll in over the river." As he spoke, the students listened intently, understanding that these personal details were as much a part of Olivia's legacy as the institutional changes her death had inspired. She had been a person first, daughter, friend, nurse, community member, before becoming a symbol. Later that evening, a special session of the City Council unanimously passed the Millfield Transparency Renewal Act, updating and strengthening the original reforms implemented after Reeves's arrest. The legislation, which had been in development for months with extensive community input, reflected Millfield's ongoing commitment to the principles that had emerged from its darkest chapter. 20 years ago, our community learned the hardest possible lesson about the dangers of unquestioned authority, Mayor Sandoval stated as she signed the legislation. Today, we recommit to the values that have guided our recovery: transparency, accountability, and the courage to speak truth to power. These are not just Millfield values, they are Olivia Bennett's legacy. As the meeting adjourned, council members and citizens mingled in the chamber, discussing the legislation and sharing memories. The atmosphere was neither celebratory nor somber, but reflective, a community acknowledging how far it had come while recognizing that vigilance against abuse of power required ongoing commitment. Robert and Megan slipped out quietly, walking hand in hand through the town square toward home. The evening was mild, stars appearing in the darkening sky above. As they crossed Bennett Bridge, they paused to watch the Hocking River flowing beneath, its surface reflecting the first stars of evening. 20 years, Robert murmured, gazing into the water that had concealed and then revealed the truth about his daughter's fate. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times, like another lifetime entirely. Megan nodded, understanding the complexity of grief's timeline. Olivia would be 42 now. I wonder what she'd think of all this, a center named for her, laws inspired by her story, generations of nurses carrying forward her principles. Robert smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes, something that had seemed impossible in the early years after Olivia's disappearance. She'd probably be embarrassed by the attention. But she'd be proud of the work, the changes. That's what mattered to her, making things better, safer, more just. As they continued homeward, lights winked on in houses throughout Millfield, windows glowing against the gathering darkness. Each represented a family, a story, a part of the community that had been transformed by truth's difficult emergence. For Robert Bennett, these lights symbolized the most meaningful form of justice, not punishment or retribution, but illumination. The truth about Olivia had surfaced from dark waters, bringing with it pain but also clarity. The systems that had failed her had been examined, reformed, strengthened. Her courage in reporting harassment, though it had ultimately led to her death, had inspired protections ensuring others could speak up safely. 20 years after Olivia's car had been pulled from the Hocking River, her father could look at his hometown and see not just the site of an unimaginable loss, but the birthplace of necessary change. The betrayal by Gregory Reeves, once Millfield's most trusted leader, had taught the community to question authority, to value transparency over comfort, to recognize that true safety comes not from blind trust but from systems of accountability. As Robert and Megan reached their home on Maple Street, they turned to look back at the town spread below them, its lights shimmering like earthbound stars. In those lights, in the community they represented, Olivia Bennett lived on, not just as a memory or a cautionary tale, but as an enduring inspiration for courage in the face of power, for truth in the face of deception, for hope in the aftermath of betrayal. Millfield, Ohio had been changed forever by the tragedy that unfolded beneath Blackwater Bridge on a foggy October night in 2012. But through the painful process of confronting that tragedy, of bringing truth to the surface after years submerged in darkness, the community had found not just healing but transformation. And in that transformation lay the most meaningful memorial to a young woman who had stood for truth, regardless of the cost. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.